Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Automated Advantage. This week we have Ramiro on, who's going to share about his business and the unique way that they're going after the visa process for companies. Please watch. There's some very enlightening and insightful comments here about running businesses and so on. So please enjoy. Hi, everyone, and welcome this week. But we have a guest. And if you could just introduce yourself, Ramiro, and tell us a little bit about you and your company.
Of course, Rick. Thanks for having me here. Great to be. So I'm Ramiro Barrios. I'm originated from Argentina. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tukki, a U.S. immigration service startup that we combine technology with attorneys, and we manage, basically every business immigration process for both individuals and companies.
No, that's good. It's interesting. And you and I, we had the pre-conversation and we were talking, we'll definitely do our best to stay away from any political inputs and things like that now. But having been a product of immigration myself 30 years ago, I'm familiar with the process and the cycle. But what is it that you guys saw? What was it that triggered you to say, I read your website, it's like, there's got to be a better way to do it, right? I mean, that's kind of the trigger point. So maybe talk us through the thinking and how you got to where you're at.
No, absolutely, and it was the same feeling. You probably had when I was doing my own immigration process. I got frustrated with the wait times, with the lack of transparency, with the manual mistakes, with the endless back and forth. And it was like, hey, this is like we are operating immigration like it was, like 30 years ago or 20 years ago, and there has not been significant, innovation in the space, and there needs to be a better way. Like we cannot, this cannot be literally, uploading hundreds of files to a Google Drive and asking updates via email and seeing what's happening, and not having access to the attorney and all these things. So it was basically kind of out of our own frustration, and then talking with that bunch of immigrants and realizing it was kind of the norm to have that experience, and also talking with attorneys and understanding the reason behind that, right? Because this is not because attorneys are not competent or they are not professionals or they're not great people. It's just the process that they are using to do this. It's a really hard one to be able to keep up with these expectations and deliver the service you really want, even if you're an excellent professional. So we realized the problem was not in the people, was not in the attorneys, but in the entire process end to end. And that's why we set out to do, to just transform the entire process end to end. And actually, we have our own attorneys, right? We don't think, again, the attorneys are the problem. We think the process is the problem. So that's why we included attorneys. We think actually they're very important, right? You really want a very experienced professional that know the ins and out of the law, and they have experience in these cases just to be with you. But add this layer on top of that just to make sure the actual process is good for everyone.
Yeah, and on that point, I mean, I've got to assume that there's key factors to it, right? I mean, I think the country from which you come makes a difference, and I think it's important, from what I understand as well, to not only just know what you need to do to get through the process, but knowing where you come from, what's necessary, what type of documents are necessary has got to be a big factor in it. Is that accurate?
That's accurate in certain visas. So, for example, the E2 visa, the investor visa, is only for treaty countries, and there's like 80, some give or take. And that visa, actually, each consulate have different requirements per nationality. There are other cases such as the H1B, the O1, the L1 that actually is the same. So the requirements are the same for every country. However, when you go to the consulate part of things, that's where things get a bit tricky. For example, with the restrictions we have been seeing with this administration, like the 70 countries that you cannot do this type of things, or the 39 countries that cannot do the other type of thing. So that's what comes into play, right? So the actual regulations, maybe with USCIS, with the government agency that is reviewing the application, maybe it's the same. But then when you need to go to the consulate or get certain benefits that, or certain requests, that's when the difference comes into play.
Yeah, no, okay, that makes sense. So when we were talking as well, is what you told me is your ideal client is obviously somebody looking for a visa, but that's one component of it, and you guys are looking to get institutions and companies, I would assume, I saw you worked at McKinsey, McKinsey's Accentures or whatever it is, to maybe buy into what you guys are doing and give them a better outcome. And that's the ultimate objective, or is it kind of parallel objective?
No, I think it's parallel. So, we want to do both. We want to do both kind of the B2C model directly with the immigrants and also B2B with companies. We really want to transform how immigration works in the country. And if you want to do that, you want to do it in both aspects, right? So, it's a bit different, but it's not that different, right? Because the underlying thing is you're doing a visa for someone, right? So the actual activity is extremely similar. The technology is extremely similar. When you work with companies, there are other things that you add on top of the underlying technology. So you want to give the HR manager visibility of all the cases. You want to give them all the important milestones coming up, all the tasks. You want to let them know if there's any problem. So this sort of like dashboard of control dashboard of the entire company, and for them to understand and to stay compliant and not to need to be doing follow-ups. But other than that, when you go one layer down, the actual thing is the same, right? We are actually processing an O1 visa, an H1B, an L1. And if I'm doing it for the actual immigrant or if I'm doing it for the company, what you do, it's very similar, and the needs are very similar, right?
Okay, now that's very interesting because again, going back to my experience, I went to a company and the accounting guy was doing it, and when I realized that things weren't happening, and I went to him, he didn't really know where to go, and it turns out that they'd misfiled my application. I had to start all over again, and I ended up going to a company who had a lady who was an immigration attorney, and oh my god, within 18 months I got a green card. It was so quick because she knew, and but to your point, she kept on top of the here's what's next, here's what's next, here's what's next, and knew how to do follow up. So I could see that a platform like you guys have would be massively helpful in just keeping things in check.
Yeah, because look, there are some great attorneys, there are some great law firms. The problem is when you add volume to them, right? So one of the problems with this industry is that this industry works in batches. What I mean by that is that typically the modus operandi of this is the attorney is going to tell you like, okay, I need you to upload absolutely all of our information in this folder. Let me know when you're done, right? So you're going to take like 2 months to do that, whatever it's like. Again, remember, one of these applications might be in some cases 800 pages, 1,000 pages, or even more. And they're not doing anything during that time, right? So maybe they have like paralegals or attorneys with free on idle time, but then you are working, but they are not starting because of you. And then the opposite happens. You tell them that, hey, this is done. And now they need to review like these hundreds of pages and forms and letters and everything. And then you are not doing anything and you're waiting. So and if you're a law firm and you have like remember most immigration law firms in this country, there's like 12,000 more or less, give or take. Most of them are very small. The typical thing is like one, two, three attorneys, a few paralegals, right? So it's not that they have like endless capacity and they don't use much technology. So imagine that you have six clients that the same day appeared after those 2 months and give you like all that. Like there's no way you're going to be able to handle that. And then there's the bottleneck, and that's how the delay starts to happen and all the frustration. So again, it's the process and the capabilities. And even if people are great at points, if you get to them when they are swamped with these other 2 3 cases that just landed that week, like you are going to need to wait, right? Because it's not possible to do that. So it's just changing the way this works to be able to provide this better and faster service, basically.
Yeah, and then maybe this is a good transition into that because so your website is .ai. So I'm assuming that you're applying some AI technology to that. So maybe without giving your super secrets away, but just kind of what types
No,
of things are
sure.
you doing?
No, I mean, look, I don't think they're super secrets. I think being successful at a company or at a startup is about execution, not about ideas. We all have the same ideas. The thing is how you execute them. So it's fine. Like you can basically scream your secrets to the whole world, and the things like actually executing is what's hard. Um, so yeah, we are using AI extensively, but we are not using AI at any point to replace a human. So our view of AI is one where you have a human in the loop at every stage, right? So for example, we make summaries for every document. So if you have an article talking about you, we're going to want to make the officers' lives easier. And instead of them just having the file, the article of 7 pages, we want to give them like a quick summary of like, look, this is an article talking about Greg and doing this and doing that, right? By the way, no one does that because it's too much work. We're the only ones that I've seen that do that. So instead of doing it ourselves, we have an AI trained on all the data set, on you, on the evidence that's appearing to. So actually, you don't want to just do a summary of the article. You want to do a summary of the article that makes sense for Greg, for that particular evidence, for that particular situation. So, for example, instead of the paralegal reading the entire article and doing it manually, we have an AI that already reads the document, creates a summary based on that, but then the paralegal reviews it, checks that everything is fine, fixes everything that needed. Then the attorney reviews the same summary to make sure everything is okay. And then finally, before approving it, the actual client receives a copy of that so they can check, like, yeah, everything is accurate here. It's all good, right? So we have like 3 layers of human review at a minimum per everything that the AI has created, right? So it's kind of like expanding the capacity and the quality. Or for example, we have AIs that check the quality of certain things, right? So it said, okay, let's review all the documentation for this particular section of the evidence and make sure like we have everything that the government is asking for. So it's kind of another set of eyes, if you will. So it's not just the criteria of the paralegal and the attorney, but you also have kind of this model that is also, taking a look at the documentation and saying like, yeah, this is a 95, this is a 50, these are the things that are missing, right? So also when things get hectic and you have a lot of volume, having kind of an automated AI that is also checking everything on top of the human. So it's not replacing the humans, but it's adding on top, right? So you make everyone better, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a really good point in the sense of just, we've all heard it, we hear it constantly. AI is taking away jobs, and it's like, maybe, or it's just transitioning jobs. But I think your example is what I've been preaching is, you just get to the answer faster. You still need somebody to check the homework. You still, especially for the intricate detail of which what you guys are doing. I mean, you can't miss, but I mean, I know that it's the end of the day and I'm reading a document and my eyes are tired and I miss something. Whereas an AI, and somebody told me this the other day and I keep using it. It says AI doesn't have feelings. You can tell it 3 times to go do the same job and they're not going to get annoyed. Right? So, but I think that's your point is and your case is valid there, as far as just, it just gets you to the answer faster, or it allows you, based on what you said, is to have more output, and
Yeah,
and, and that's
or look, like I give you an example, right? Like let's say that you are a client and you want to send me like 5, 6 documents of an evidence so I can review it and I can tell you whether that's enough or not. So in our platform, if you do that manually, you are going to send it to our paralegal, right? Which is the first one that receives it. So maybe the paralegal is busy, so they are going to take like 3, 4 days to be able to get to that evidence. And then maybe they review it and they give you some feedback of things missing. But then you are busy now, right? And we have a lot of clients that are very busy. So now you take 1 week to review it. So now it took 10 days for you to get an actionable feedback and to give it back. Now, if you check with our AI, immediately before sending it to us, you can actually get immediate feedback in the moment where you are already focused there, you're getting the documentation. And then maybe you get the AI saying like, hey, actually these 2 things are missing. You have them there, you add them. And now we solve 10 days of delay that otherwise that you would have waited, right? So that's like just one example of like many, 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 many. I always say that immigration is death by 1,000 cuts. It's like, it's not just one thing. It's like the accumulation of all these inefficiencies across the board, which end up killing the experience and producing all these mistakes, right? So it's just like addressing each one of them. Some of them you address them with AI. Some of them you address them just with a better process, better workflow, better platform.
Yeah, no, and I think that's helpful for context. So having said that, now you talked about your kind of the two parallel lanes. What are you guys doing to attract attention and find your customers? How are you advertising? And I'd say let's isolate it by the B2C, and then I think the B2B stuff from what we talked about is maybe just a little new. What are you doing to get your name out there?
So I would say still the majority of people that come to us are referred by a happy customer or by someone that knows us and they like what we do. But we are increasing our social media presence. We have done a lot of free stuff in our website, so we have a lot of videos explaining, like we have courses about visas, we have visa guides, we have pricing and timeline tools so people can know exactly how much they're going to pay in government fees, in how much it's going to take. We have compare visas tools. So we're just building that learning hub, and so for people to answer, have all their questions answered about immigration, and being that kind of free resource for them. And we're partnering a lot with different organizations, getting them to know us. And but look, for me, the most important thing is that referral engine that we are creating. So we are obsessed about customer experience, and for them to really have a great experience with us, so that eventually they're going to refer us, right? And because I think it's the healthiest version of growing, on top of like other channels. You can do paid, you can do content, you can do outbound. Like, we are testing many initiatives, but I think at the end of the day, we are kind of a product led company or a service led company. And for us, the most important thing is that the experience is really a differentiator, the service, the quality, everything. Because we are always, all the time, like thinking long term, and long term, that's what matters, right? Because you can put a lot of money on media, you can do a lot of things, but then if the service is not up to up to what you needed, like eventually that's not going to work.
Mhm.
And also, immigration is an industry that inherently works by referrals, right? If you ask anyone how did they get their attorney, probably 95% of people are going to tell you like, hey, someone talked to me about them.
That's true. Yeah, I believe. And now that you say that, I think that that's true. Yeah, that's very eye opening as far as that's concerned. And I like the fact that when I was looking at the website about that the pricing thing and all of that, because and this is a negative statement, but I've seen out there where I do think sometimes some of these attorneys take advantage of people and put the fear in them, and it's like this massively expensive process, and it's like you guys make it very transparent as to what it could be.
Yeah, and look, even if you want to be transparent, let's say in the consultation with the client, there are so many fees, so many variables, right? Like, if you have dependents, if you don't, if you want to do consular processing or change of status, if you want to have a travel permit, a work permit, like, there's like so many permutations that it's virtually impossible to really communicate accurately in the moment, right? There's even certain countries that for certain visas have reciprocity fees. So, for example, if you're doing an E2 in Australia, you need to pay like thousands of dollars more just because it's in Australia. But if you do it consular, you don't. So it's so complicated that we ended up doing this very dynamic tool where you just answer like 5, 6 questions, and you get exactly like all the fees, when you need to pay them. Like, and that's also transparency, right? The same way our platform is very transparent and you can see exactly where you are across the process. We wanted to be very transparent with pricing, and really show up front, right? Like, look, like, this is the cost, this is all the cost, right? Not just the first one, but all the ones, right? I've always hated experiences when you hire someone and then all of a sudden it ends up costing like 2 times what you thought, because, oh, this happened and that happened and this wasn't accounted for, right? So for us, it's like, look, this is the flat fee. You're going to pay this no matter what. Like, there's no other things, right? Everything we put there is exactly what you're going to pay and not a dime more. And I think that's also very good for individuals, and also very good for companies, right? Because companies have the additional thing, um, the additional thing of like the budget, and how much can we spend or not, and working with the CFO, and all that. So I think that's also very well received.
So everybody, not everything's always perfect. We had a little technical glitch there, but we're back. So Ramiro, we were just catching up on the process and the transparency of fees and all of that. So I think we captured most of that. So maybe now just shifting to um, entrepreneurship and your experience. And I mean, I think it's kind of unique in the sense of, not unique, but the fact that both of us are immigrants. And maybe just tell me about your experiences, and then maybe in that realm, what advice you have for people. If you have an idea, you have a thought, you have a situation. So listen, I think I'm going to do a business for myself. What's what?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I'm having a great time. I really enjoy being an entrepreneur. I think the biggest difference between having a job and being an entrepreneur is on the pressure and the amount of uncertainty that you have, right? Because and I would say even more the uncertainty, because for look, I was working for McKinsey, right? I had plenty of pressure, right? And we worked a lot, right? It was common to stay until 2 a.m. working at the client side and having tight deadlines and high stakes on that. So I think many people have like very intense jobs where you need to work a lot and you have a lot of pressure. But I think here is kind of the level of uncertainty that you have, and it's a different level of pressure, right? You have people depending on you. You're paying the salaries of the company. You have clients where you're responsible for their immigration, in this case, right? So I think it's about uncertainty and doing a lot of things that you don't necessarily like to do or know how to do. So there's kind of not no network. There's no mentor in the company that's going to oversee what you're doing. And a lot of things, I think, when you're building a company, hopefully you're doing new things that there's not a playbook written before. So many times, let's say you are doing marketing at a, I don't know, consumers goods company. Like there's plenty of examples of what that is and how to execute that well. So basically following the playbooks and executing what the team is giving you and the guidelines and everything, you should be fine. And sure, there is a matter of innovation and changing and things that you need to know that you don't know, but there's like a big support network to help you, to guide you, like you see what are the good practices. In our case, for example, when I was building this, like there's no software like this. I was like, okay, when I wanted to see like how these things were done, it's like, okay, the attorneys with Google Drive and emails, and so you had to do everything on your own. And just how do you explain this to someone? And there's no point of comparison. So I think that's the big difference. And you should be very comfortable with uncertainty. You should be very comfortable with not knowing if this is going to work out, not, seeing the bank account go down, and you say, okay, I have 6 months to live. And if I don't figure this out, like I need to lay everyone off. So those are the things that I've seen that are like the biggest change. I remember when I was raising money, our first round, and we mainly raised from angel investors that basically were all of our friends, family, coworkers, which is significantly worse because you know all of them. Um, and I remember one of them that invested 50K, and when he told me that he was going to invest 50K, I remember like I freaked out. And I said, like, that's too much. Like, like, do I really want to do this? Like, this is the moment to stop, right? Like, I felt kind of that pressure on my chest. Like, hey, like this guy, which is a good friend, is going to give me $50,000. Like, and I might lose it all, right? Like, I'm a really, I'm a really okay doing that, right? So I remember that kind of feeling of pressure for that responsibility for having that. And also when I was hiring people at the beginning, right? I remember it seemed that I didn't want to hire them because I was telling them, like, look, I have money for 6 months, right? I cannot assure you anything beyond that. So if you want to come work with us, like that's great. But I just want to tell you there is like a non-trivial chance that in 6 months this is going to disappear. So that was kind of like, that feeling of responsibility for managing the money of other people, or having people quit their job to come work with you. So I think that's the biggest change. I think beyond that, like the day to day is very similar to having a job, right? You just need to sell or build a product or operate. Like the rest is very, very similar.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point you make there, because somebody that I have that is a mentor, is a CEO, says, the biggest thing with a CEO is execute, execute, execute. Like that's just, make a decision. And sometimes you're going to make a good decision and sometimes you're going to make a shitty decision, but just make a decision. If you sit down and just debate and discuss, you won't get anything done. And, 60-70% of the time you get it right. So there was a word of advice. And I think it's similar to what you're saying. And the other thing that you said too is, having done the same thing, work for three large Fortune 5 companies, and and feeling the pressure of that, is pressure. But what I'm feeling about this, for me doing what I'm doing now, is it's almost liberating, right? I mean, yes, there is pressure. There's a different thing, but you're in massive control. And then maybe the last piece of it, you said working really hard, is somebody try to, hey, you can work 2 hours a day and make $1 million. I was like, nobody does that. Like, and I think you can validate what I'm saying is you got to be ready to roll up your sleeves and do some stupid tasks that you may not have done in the past, but stuff's got to get done. And I feel like the right entrepreneurs are not afraid to do that.
Oh, look, like for more than 2 years, I was doing the bookkeeping of the company and doing all the details and, like every single thing. And I mean, sometimes people, you hear people saying, like, yeah, I want to be an entrepreneur because I don't want to have a boss. Like, that's a really bad decision, right? You're going to have many bosses, right?
Yeah.
All the investors, the clients, even sometimes the team. So, it's not a lifestyle choice. I think like it's really demanding, and you should do it only if you're really passionate about building that and it's really an exciting idea for you. But I think there's way smarter ways of making a good living and making money, right? I don't think it's the smart choice, right? Like and before leaving McKinsey, I actually did the math because McKinsey salaries are public. Like if you Google them, like you know exactly what's the range that partners make, first year,
Yeah.
second year, 5 year, senior partner. Like it's very public. So and also like for me talking internally with people, right? So I knew. So I basically made the math of like, okay, if had I stayed at McKinsey and worked there for 20 years, like what was my estimated, net worth after that? And if I went into entrepreneurship, like and assuming the typical risk of like startups, being very successful, and you adjust the risk for that the outcome, and McKinsey won every single time from an economic perspective, right? There was no comparison. Like economically speaking, like lifestyle, pressure, uncertainty, money, everything, like McKinsey was orders of magnitude better than the risk adjusted decision of going out and just testing an idea. So I don't think making money is the right reason to do something like this, because again, there's easier ways typically, right? There's easier way to make like a very good living and earn good money.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting concept. Nobody's said that before, but I resonate with that as too. It's like I could have a very high paying job to do this, and I was been sitting over the last few days thinking about 401ks and all of that stuff. But there's all of the other value that I'm truly am seeing, the interaction with people, and really standing behind what I believe that I'm doing is actually, I mean, game changing is a strong word, but valuable to people. So that's a very, very unique perspective, and I appreciate that.
No, thanks for it. No, I mean, look, life is too short, right? Like you should be doing what you're passionate about and what excites you. And I always think like, there's this sentence, this phrase by Steve Jobs that if you wake, I think it's by Steve Jobs, that if you wake up every day thinking that, it's going to be your last, one day you're going to be right. So, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, right? So,
Yeah.
someday we're not going to be here anymore, right? And we don't know when that is, right? Like it's not necessarily when you're 90, right? And I think it's too precious of a time to just be doing something you don't like, or something that is not your preferred choice, right? Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you need to do things you don't like. That's fine, right? Like it's not always possible. But if you're lucky enough to be able to choose, right, and to adventure yourself into something that you really like, I think that's what you should do, right? And but again, that should be the reason, because other than I want to make billions that I see in the news, right? Because I don't think the possibilities of that outcome are so slim that again, and the amount of work and hours and pressure and everything you need to put is not going to be worth it. So I think it's mostly about like, are you passionate about it? Are you very excited about trying it out? And worst case scenario, it fails and you go back to whatever else, it's possible for you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a very telling thing, and kind of taking it back because it's similar. McKinsey, Accenture, IBM, kind of similar vein. Uh, I had the opportunity to make a change from Accenture, and I doubted it. And I said to my wife, I don't know. She said, "You're so unhappy. Like you just not a happy person. And I started doing something different, and people told me, it's like, wow, the change in you is amazing. Like, you just seem like a happy person. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not making any money right now. I'm trying to get a thing going, but I'm very happy. so, so I'm validating your conversation there. So, um, this was incredibly enlightening. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. I mean, I don't know if there's you've given us lots of words of wisdom, but just if there's one parting thing to tell people, advice to give. I mean, the thing is, I'm at the ender of my career, and there's people starting out young. It's like, what's what's a bit of advice?
No, I think just I think there's a lot of qualities in professionals that maybe people undervalue or don't think are as important. I think there's a few that it's good to keep in mind. So one is just make sure you make things happen, whatever it is, right? Even if it's very small. If you say you're going to do something, just do it, and make sure it's done, and make sure like no one needs to be following up or asking you what's happened with that, etc. Even if it's the most trivial thing, I think that's one of the most important traits I see in people. Like, when they tell you like, hey, I'm going to do this, and they make it happen. Even better when they ask for it, like, hey, do you think, I can do that, or whatever. And just that proactive attitude, of like, okay, adding value to the company. And it doesn't need to be grandiose or complex or like the high level stuff, like whatever it is, right? Just taking care of things, just being a machine of asking for things and getting them done and nailing them, even if it's very simple. And that attitude, right, of wanting to do that. One of the best team members I have, she actually, when she applied, she was rejected. So she didn't pass the test. And she's emailed us and say like, hey, why did I wrong, right? And we told her, and she was like, hey, can I apply again? I was like, sure. And she applied. And then she came, and in the interview, I mean, she wasn't the best candidate. Actually, she was the weakest of all the others. And she didn't have the right knowledge or whatever. But we fell in love with her attitude. And we actually hired her, and we told her, like, look, we are going to hire you because we love your attitude. But you are behind all these people in like A, B, C, D, E, and we need you to improve that in order to succeed, right? And she crushed it. She crushed it. She absolutely crushed it, right? And she kept improving herself every single month and doing everything we wanted to and more. And and she's doing absolutely great. And I think there is very little things in this world that can be better than that sort of attitude, right? The attitude and commitment and responsibility. It doesn't matter if you are the smartest, the highest, the highly educated, the credentials, the pedigree. I think if you have that attitude and that responsibility and you learn at a fast pace, I think you are unstoppable, basically.
I love that. I love it, and I'm going to validate that by I used to coach soccer when my kids were younger, and I was they had this elite team that you had to pick children to, and I learned that most often you get the superstars and all of that, but the superstars with bad attitudes were never a good fit for the team. If you got a kid who was pretty good but wanted to be there, game changing, and so I think it's the same for business.
Absolutely.
So no, this was incredible. I love this. There's a very different conversation to many I've had, but it's very refreshing. I really enjoyed it, and thank you so much for taking the time to be on.
Likewise, right? Great to be here.